Baruch Hashem, today's Daf Yomi is Zevachim Daf Vav. This is the Daf Yomi for Shabbos Kodesh. And of course, we're studying it and recording it on Friday afternoon. So the Gemara is dealing with the fundamental question that if a person had the wrong intent when he brought a sacrifice, first of all, let me say, that the Daf is dedicated for Shemir for the Chayalim, Matzah for the Shviyim, and Yeshua for Am Yisrael, and the Seis Tzara. We're going to start on the bottom of Hayam Bay's 5b, around 7 lines from the bottom. The Gemara is in the middle of a discussion. Gemara has established that if a person brings a sacrifice with the wrong intent, the Mishnah said the sacrifice is kosher, but has not fulfilled its obligation. In that context, Rish Lakish says, well, if it's kosher, then why doesn't it fulfill its obligation? So the Gemara, Rebbe Lazar, answered Rish Lakish by saying, well, it's not a surprise because sometimes you have sacrifices that are brought after a person is dead and they fulfill their obligation. So the Gemara says, in that context, the Gemara then raised the point that Rish Lakish said that how do we know that Rish Lakish would agree with that premise, that the sacrifices that are brought after death don't fulfill their obligation? Maybe they do fulfill their obligation. So in that context, Rav Ada bar Matzah said, well, how could they fulfill their obligation? Let's say a woman who gives birth dies, and then her children bring the sacrifice. What obligation is it fulfilling for them? So the Gemara says, well, yeah, maybe it does, because maybe when the woman brings the sacrifice, it atones for multiple things. And so too, when her son brings the sacrifice, maybe it's able to fulfill their needs also, their atonement as well. So in that context, the Gemara says, oh, so you mean the heirs are actually acquiring the animal when they bring this offering, when they inherit it when they inherit it? When Memra Dikanyalu, you mean to say that the heirs are actually acquiring the animal of their father, and therefore they're able to achieve atonement. How could that be? V'amar Rabbi Yochanan, didn't Rabbi Yochanan teach us? And this is from a Gemara Menachos. Let's say somebody separated a grain offering to be brought as an offering on the altar, and then he died. He left behind the grain offering for his 2 sons, umeis, and then he died. That we say that they bring it, and it's not considered a partnership, because we know that a grain offering, a mincha, cannot be brought if it's owned by partners. And if you say they've acquired it, the Torah says that a mincha can only be brought by one person, not 2. So it must be they haven't acquired it. So the Gemara says, is that really the case? The lo kanyahu, that they have not acquired it? How can we say that position either? Rabbi Yochanan says, let's say a person leaves an animal for his 2 sons, umeis, and he dies. Kreva, then they are able to bring it. And we say they are able to bring it, and they do not, if they try to do a tamur on it, like an exchange of that animal, it doesn't work. Now, if you say they've acquired it, the reason why they can't do a tamura makes sense, because they're partners, and partners cannot effectuate what's called an exchanged animal. If you want to say they've acquired it, that's why they can't do this exchange. Because they're partners. On top of 6a, and the partners are not able to do this tamura, as Rashi says, that we learned that everybody can do an exchange except for partners, because all passages said in the singular. So therefore, it wouldn't take effect. But if you say they have not acquired, then they should be able to effect a truma, a tamura. So we see from here that from the fact that they can't do the tamura, it's proof that they've acquired it. So the Gemara says, no, Shani Hasam, the case of Tamura is different. Even though they have not acquired it, nevertheless, we're going to say that two heirs are not able to do a Tamura. Why? The Amakra im Hamer Yamir. So the Pasuk says, im Hamer Yamir, if they do a exchange, to tell us, Harabos as a Yorish Echad, Harabos as a Yorish, Echad Memir, Ve'in Shnai Memir, to tell us only one heir can do a Tamura, but not two. And that's why in this case, even though they haven't acquired it, the two heirs cannot effectuate a Tamura. So Maskefar Rav Yaakov Minahar Pakod, so Rav Yaakov Minahar Pakod raises the following challenge. Well, if that's the case, Almeata Gabe Meiser, with respect to Meiser, where it says by the tithe, Im Gaol, Yigal Ish Vimasro, if that a person wants to redeem their tithe, this comes to include if a person is redeeming his tithe in order to eat in Jerusalem, he has to add on a fifth. But if you're going to say Vim Gaol Yigal, that if a person is coming to include it, it's the ma'aser that he inherited from his father. A rabbo says a yorish, that comes to include an heir. Then an heir can also redeem his father's tithe and add on 1/5. So if that's the case, we should say Achinami Echa Gol Vein Shnaim Golim. That you should say that if two heirs inherit the ma'aser of their father, that they cannot redeem it, just like it says Im Hamer Yamer. So also Im Gaol Yigal. So the Gemara says no. Shani ma'aser. No, the case of Meiser is different. Because even by their father, if they had owned it in partnership, they would be able to redeem it. Because the Torah doesn't say that partners cannot redeem Meiser Sheni. But Tamura, the reason is because all the parashas said in the singular can't be redeemed in that manner by partners. So two heirs cannot effectuate a Tamura. So it says the Gemara, Amrle Rav Azir of Sheshis, Umina. Why don't we learn from this very ruling? If you're going to say that the heirs have indeed acquired it, that would explain why if there's one heir, he's able to do Tamura. But if you say that he hasn't acquired it, how is the heir ever to do a Tamura? Hamakdish Mosif Chomesh Umischaper Ose Tamura. That Umischaper Ose Tamura. That the one who is Makdish, that the one who makes a vow and he separates the animal to serve as an atonement, and then the animal gets a blemish and he wants to redeem it, then he has to add on a fifth to it. And also, the second thing that Rabbi Yochanan says is mischaper oset tamura, that the one who's achieving atonement, and he's the one who's able to effectuate a tamura. Only the one who's achieving atonement. And one who gives a tithe from his own property on the basis of his friend, meaning somebody separates his truma, and he's saying I'm separating it from the bushel of my friend, meaning say I'm taking this 1/50th and I'm excluding my friend from having to give a tithe now. Then the one who separates it, he has the ability to give it to whichever Kohen he wants. So anyway, we see from here, and so therefore we see from here anyways the fundamental question, because the point that it's making is that you cannot affect the truma, the tamura, unless you own it. We see from here that the person who is getting the kapara, he's the one who's able to affect an atonement. So that's what Rabbi Yochanan is saying. That the one who that's the one who's able to affect the atonement. Only the one who gets the kapara is able to do the tamura. And so therefore, if one Yoresh can affect tamura, this proves that he's acquired it with the korban, and he has the ability to affect the atonement. And so the Gemara answers Mikiva lo mechapra, mikupya mechapra. So the Gemara's answer is that there's two different types of atonement. There's what's called mikiva, which is, Rashi says, kapara kavua. This is a fixed atonement, that the owner will be, that the heir will be the actual owner. That they don't have. So therefore, by a mincha, it's able to be brought because they're not partners. But they do still have kapara kufya. That's just like floating. And so therefore, they can affect the tamura. Therefore, they can affect the tamura. So, okay, so now the Gemara asks another question. Ibayalu, the Gemara asked the question, Kipru amashabo, olo kipru. So the Gemara's basic fundamental question is very, very simple question. The Gemara says, these kachim that were slaughtered, shalol lishman, and then they're brought, they were slaughtered for the wrong intent, and then they're brought, and it says they have not fulfilled their obligation, and you now have to bring another one. Nevertheless, okay, so the question is, do they atone for the sin that they were designated for? Even though he has to bring another one, in the meantime, has he achieved designation so that Rashi says, Shalo yidag v'nayisurim b'intayim. So he shouldn't be worried about afflictions that'll come on him, that he shouldn't be a sitting duck waiting just for heavenly afflictions until he brings a second offer. So that's what the Gemara asks that question. They've not fulfilled any atonement. These because if you want to say that they have achieved an atonement, Shani Lamuba, why do you have to bring a second one? So the Gemara says, well, if that's the case, so you say they haven't achieved atonement. So if it doesn't achieve atonement, then why does he have to continue bringing it? For what does it accomplish? So Amar Rav Ashi, Rav Shesha B'rei Ravidi, he was bothered by the following. If you want to say it has not achieved any atonement, if that's the case, shalolishma mikoach l'shmo ka'asi. So if that's the case, if you want to say he has not achieved any atonement, that he has not achieved any atonement, and nevertheless, Rashi says it's brought, because Shalol Shmo, Rashi says, the lack of intent is coming from the strength of intent. That it was designated with the right intent. And the second is coming to atone for the sin. Meaning to say, Rashi says, if it was an Oah, it'll atone for the Asay, or if it's an Asham, it will be atone for the Asham also. So basically, this is what he was asking. If you say that the first garment does not affect atonement, we understand Shalol Shmo. We know Mikol Shmo Kasi. Then we know why we need to bring the first one, because it was initially consecrated for the Lishmo, for the right reasoning. So if you say that it serves as an atonement, if you say it does not serve as an atonement, we understand why it was continuing to be brought, because it was still originally consecrated for that reason. But Visheni Lamahuba, and why does the second one come? Lechaper, because the first one doesn't provide a kapara, it just needs to be brought. And the second, why is it coming? To provide a kapara. Eliamris Kipru. But if you say that the first one does provide a complete lishma, Sheni Lama Uba, why is the second one coming? So it must be that the first one does not provide a lishma. The Gemara says, well, Ibayalu. The Gemara asks another question. Say the achar hafrashas mechapra or lo mechapra. Let's say you violate a positive commandment after you already separated your olah, you separated your karban to be brought as an offering, as an atonement for missing out on a positive commandment, and now you did another sin. So does that you violate another positive commandment? So does that animal you designated serve as an atonement or not? I'm reading midi dehavi achatas. Do we say it's like a chatas? Ma chatas, just like a sin offering. that when you separate a sin offering, the Kodem Afrasha and the Achar Afrasha, it only atones for those sins that happen, before the separation, but not after the separation. Also by an Ola, we'll say the same thing. Or maybe the Ola is not like the Chatas. For every sin offering, you need to bring one sin offering. But by an Ola, it can achieve atonement for several violations of the positive commandment at once. So then maybe for the positive commandment that happens after the separation, it should still serve as an atonement. So the Gemara says, let's try and give an answer. Tashma v'samach v'nirtza. It says in the Brisa that the pasuk says he put his hands on it and gains acceptance. Is the smicha, the laying of the hands that achieves atonements? It's the blood that receives atonement. It says ki adam hu b'nefesh yechaper. The blood will achieve the atonement. She'im also a smicha shiyari mitzvah. Why does it say the pasuk for samach v'nirtzah chaper? Then if he treated the smicha as the shiyari mitzvah, something unimportant to the mitzvah, mala kasav kilu lo chiper v'chiper. The pasuk is going to consider him as though he did not achieve atonement, even though it did. My love, what does it mean? When it says the pasuk considers him as though he did not achieve atonement, even though he did. The keeper asay the kodem afrasha, low keeper asay the smicha, davle asay the achar afrasha. Don't we read it from here that he achieved atonement for the positive violations that he did before the separation, but it does not. But that korban does not achieve atonement for the violation of not doing smicha. Davle asay the achar afrasha. So we see from here that an asay that's done after the separation of the animal does not achieve, after designation, does not achieve atonement. Gemara says, what kind of proof is that? Amarava asay the smicha kamras. You're talking about the asay of smicha, the positive commandment of that you have to lay your hands on an animal. Shani also in that case is different. Kol kama delo shachot ba'amanu samochai, because as long as he didn't yet do the shlita, he can still do the smicha, so he hasn't missed anything. Amos kavi asay, when has he violated the positive commandment? But achar shlita, only once he's done the slaughter, or achar shlita won't come by. Well, it's obviously the case that if for a positive violation you do after the shlita, you have not fulfilled atonement. So therefore, obviously it's the case that the olah doesn't affect atonement for not doing smicha. So, and Amalei Rav Huna Bar Yehuda Rava, there's even another way to read that brisa. Ema kiper gavra, that the brisa, when it says v'samach v'nirtza lechaper, maybe it means that the olah atones for the person for all of his violations. This person, but lo kiper kameshmaya. But when it says he does not affect atonement, it means that he doesn't gain acceptance in shemayim for it. Meaning, say keeper gabra, lo keeper gabra. Raj says, "Akol asay shebiyodo v'nitzal min yisurim." He saved from the afflictions, but lo keeper kape shemai on the top of vavam abeis, he hasn't achieved the ultimate goal, which is nachas ruach hakono. He hasn't achieved a good nachas, a good delight for his creator, because he didn't do the mitzvah mina mufkar. He didn't do the ideal mitzvah. So he receives atonement for his violations, so he doesn't need to bring another sacrifice to atone, to protect from punishment, but he has not done the mitzvah mina mufkar. How do we know that this is what it means? When it says we did not achieve atonement, it means we did not atone with regard to Shemayim, that we didn't do mitzvah min ha'mavkar. Or milotinan, didn't we learn in a Mishnah about the purification of the Mitzorah? It says vanosar. It says in the pasuk vanosar b'shemen, that it says in the pasuk that whatever is left over, the remnants of the oil, asher al kaf, chaper of Hashem, the remainder of the oil that's on the palm, you should put on the head of the person to be an atonement for Hashem. Im nasan chiper v'im lo nasan lo kiper. So if you put the oil on the head, the Mitzvah achieves atonement. If not, he did not. That's what Rabbi Akiva says. Rabbi Yochanan and Nuri Omer shiarai mitzvahin beinitain bein shalonitain kiper. So this is just the shiarai mitzvah. It's not the essential mitzvah, but nevertheless, if he did not apply it, ma'on alav ki'ul kiper. We say that you've achieved atonement whether or not it was applied, but we view you as though you did not. What does it mean, my ki'ul kiper? What does it mean as though he did not achieve atonement? If you want to say, well, it means he has to bring another carbon. We just said he achieves atonement. So therefore, what are we talking about here? It must be El Kippur Gavra, El Kippur Kapishmai. He has achieved like the technical atonement that he's not subject to afflictions, but he has not achieved the atonement as relates to heaven. And that's exactly what it means here. Alchinami Kippur Gavra, El Kippur Kapishmai. Gemara says, no, Rava says, Hasam Nami Kippur Matan Bahonos. No, there we could say it means he has achieved atonement with respect to the Bahonos. So after the Mitzorah is received tahara, he has to bring certain sacrifices and a lug of oil, and the Kohen took some oil, pours it into the hand of another Kohen, dips a finger from his right hand into this oil and sprinkles it. And after doing that, the Kohen applies oil to the right ear, thumb, and big toes of the Mitzorah. So therefore, under this case, that's why he's achieved atonement, because he's applied the oil to the thumbs, the thumb of the right hand and the big toe of the right foot and the right ear. So therefore, that's how he's achieved atonement. Below kippur matanos arosh, but the applications on the head have not achieved atonement. So maybe it's just telling us he doesn't have to repeat the process. It relates to the hand, the right ear, the hand, and the right finger and the big toe, but he does have to do it as it relates to the applications on the head. So the Gemara says, okay, we still want to answer this question. Tashma, Rabbi Shimon Omer, does the Olah achieve atonement for sins committed after its designation as an Olah? Kivsei atzeres lama him bayin. He says, so the Gemara says, let's bring a proof from the Kivsei Atzeres, that on Shavuos, 2 lambs are brought as shlamim. And so he says, why does the Kivsei Atzeres, why are they brought? So the Gemara says, well, I thought we were talking about an Olah. Kivsei Atzeres shlamim ninu. This Kivsei Atzeres are shlamim offerings, not Olah offerings. And what's the Irei Atzeres lamei barin? The goat of the Atzeres, why is it coming? So the Gemara says it's coming for Tumas Mikdash V'Kedasha. It's coming for atone for the temple, for entering the temple in a state of ritual impurity. So Nizrak Damo Sharishon Sheni Lamakarav. So if that's the case, if they're both atoning for the sin of Tumas Mikdash V'Kedasha, why do we need 2? Once the blood from the first one was brought, why do we need the second one? So it must be that it's being brought for al tumah shura bein zelazeh, for the tumah that happened between them. Amar me'ata. So say on this basis, ru'in hayu Yisrael akiv karbanosei b'chol esu b'chol shah. The Jewish people could have brought their karbanos at every time. El shachisei v'hakosuv. But the Torah, meaning to say, we always have to keep bringing more offerings because we always made a mistake. So if that's the case, the Torah held back from us to spare our expense. So we should have had to require constant karbanos. So the Torah wanted to go easy on us. But here the second goat is brought for a say that happened after it was separated, because it happened for the tumah that happened between the first and the second, and we say it achieves atonement. Gemara says not necessarily. Yeah, they weren't separated at the same time; they were separated one after the other. Gemara says, are we going to say that the pasuk that when it was written, it was saying that they can only separate the goats in this manner, one after the other? So So that seems like far-fetched. So Amar Papa, Karbanos Tzibor Kamras, you're talking about communal offerings? Shani Karbanos Tzibor, delay bathing Kamasalam. No, the court makes the condition that that the second, so therefore they when they stipulate the second goat, it doesn't take effect until right before it was brought. The knife directs them whatever they should be. Meaning to say that we do it, when we separate it with the best interests of the community. So let's stop here, Baruch Hashem, and we'll pick this up, God willing. That we'll review this on Shabbos. Hold on. Let me see the question here from